So what I'm going to do is I'm initially going to just find a few parts of this tree that are interesting to me. For instance, that shadow that goes across the trunk, close up to us. That's pretty cool. I like that, the way that comes up, down, and those sort of branches sticking up. I'm going to make just a little diagram that captures a sense of that. And I'll hold my hands up, say what is the shape that I want. I want sort of a tall thing. I'm figuring out kind of the boundaries of what that shape is going to be there. That's what I want. I'll draw that little box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a broad, dull pencil. Allow me to make my marks fill in sort of space and shapes rather quickly. Here is my tree trunk coming up like this. I'm looking up there, it comes down, over, down. Then I have a branch that curves in like this. It's neat with a big, fat pencil like this one, how it really quickly is going to allow me to make shadows, tones, these sorts of things. It's a sort of very strange, unbelievable angle that this tree makes. And what I'm initially going to look at is just what is going on with light and shadow on this tree trunk. And so I'm going to put in the shape of the shadows that I see going across the trunk. And here is this. I lightly sketched it in with my non-photo blue pencil. And most of that seems to be in shadow, so I'm going to quickly put this in. I don't have to draw the entire thing. I'm going to just do this little section that caught my eye.
The lightning bolt section.
Mm-hmm.
Oak is this?
Yeah, these are valley oaks. Have this little rock off on the side here. There you go. So I've just sort of picked a piece of this tree that caught my curiosity and drew it here. back, I'm going to draw in a little twig. Okay. So my first little study is done. And something that allowed me to do it quickly was that I was using really broad pencil. I'm just going to, here's a great exercise to do when you're sort of initially playing with a tree. I'm going to just sort of kind of play along the shape of its branch. So this time, rather than doing a scene, I am just going to look up at this branch, and as it comes along, I am going to sometimes what I'll do is I'll look out at the branch itself and not down at my paper once I'm kind of in a place that is. And branches will do things that you don't expect them to do.
Like have elbows.
Yeah, these sort of weird elbows, and especially when it kind of turns towards you a little bit, you'll see that they'll make these unbelievable angles and turns. And then what I can use sort of a squiggle, and I'll hatch part of that to give it a little bit of tone, to just represent areas of foliage. So rather than drawing individual leaves out here, what I'm doing is I'm making a line that is suggesting kind of the rough edge of these leaves, and then turning some of those into areas of tone where there's more shadow on it, letting other places be windows where you are seeing foliage through them. Here. Something that I think is fun to do is to look on the branch and sort of see where are there areas of light and where are there areas of shadow. Depending on the angle that you're seeing the branch from, it'll go in and out of shadow. And if you put in those areas of light and shadow on the branch, that often does a lot to start to kind of carve it for you.
You have shadow areas in the leaf shapes.
In those leaf shapes. So for those leaves, what I'm not doing is I'm not drawing the first leaf, the next 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 leaf.
No.
I am suggesting the mass of these leaves. And it's going to be a lot easier for me because of look at how blunt this tip is. So with one sort of stroke there, I get a big bold branch, and I can you might try just sort of looking up there at the tree and seeing a branch, and try just looking up at it and not so much looking at your paper, but letting your eye spend most of its time looking up at the branch and following around what you see with its curves. By doing that, I got this kind of crazy shape. If I'm more looking down at my paper, there's no way I'd let myself do that, because, you know, it's this wacky, impossible shape, but I'm looking at something that's kind of coming towards me at this weird angle, and, you know, that's actually what it's kind of doing. And if I'm spending too much time looking down at the piece of paper, then what happens is my brain is going to go like, branches can't do that. You can't have your branch do that. That's nuts. But if you are actually just looking up at the tree, you can let yourself do that and make those sort of impossible turns that the branches do. So for leaves out here on this thing, I am making sort of suggested shapes, adding shadows into some portions of those. Am I looking up there and saying, oh, right there's a little sort of small subcluster of these little leaves, and there's a little shadow on the left-hand side of that? No, I'm not. They're blowing around in the wind, they're constantly moving. If I'm trying to track individual little kind of grouplets of leaves, I'm going to go nuts, even trying to find the same little cluster when I look back up there. Like, which leaf was I on? Yeah, and you think that you're supposed to find that exact same spot. Instead, what I want to do is get a feeling for the energy of the way that branch curves. Like, look at this crazy thing kind of coming towards us here, this lower branch. See how it comes towards us and starts snaking towards us? See, that angle as it's coming snaking towards us, that's gold. That's great stuff that is happening right there. It gives it this really oaky feel. But if you're to make up a branch out of your head, there's no way you'd let yourself do that. Another thing, looking at this branch, notice on it where it's in sunlight and where it's in shade, right? So I'm going to move over there. Stay where you are. Oops. So from where you are, this is in shade, right? So you've got shade, you've got batches of sunlight here, and then as you're looking up on this thing here, notice sort of where it's in shadow, all right? Notice where it's in sun, and notice that where at the edge of shadow and sun is a distinct shape. You can draw the edge of that shadow, all right? So what I'm going to do is a little sketch where I'm going to try to get the form of this, and then I'm just going to look at where on this branch is it shadow, where is it sunlight. If I can get that, where this is going into sun and where it's going into shade is because of the angle of this branch. So I get my shape. I'm now going to put in where I'm going to look at what are the shapes of the patches of sunlight that I see. And it may help to actually draw those in as a line on your piece of paper to help you sort of see those edges. those shadows are going to carve this shape in three-dimensional space. And there are all these furrows and other sorts of things on them. It's going to maybe difficult to get everything on this. But I'm going to put a little bit of a hint of the texture on this, especially where these shadows meet the sort of this edge between the light and the shadow there. Hey, Pax. This little angle here, there's no way I would I couldn't make this up. I think that a great way to approach trees initially is to draw parts of trees. If you can get that little branch to feel like that little branch, if you can get that little part of that trunk feel like that, find some little element and get here. I'm seeing these, like, let's say I want to get sort of what happens with these sort of thin branches that kind of come out at the end here. I'll do a little experiment with that. I like the way a lot of these branch tips I kind of let my pencil kind of pause and wiggle at the end of these sort of strokes here. I'm getting these sort of, where there seem to be these buds that are out there at the tips. I can get a hint of that by pausing the little pencil out there, just kind of wiggling it a little bit before I lift my pencil off. I find it really, really difficult to follow something like, line for line, branch for branch, twig for twig. But if I can get something that kind of gives me a feeling of what that looks like, that I think is a very useful thing. If I put in dark back here, then that pops it. And just, I'm going to put it lightly back here. Really, what I'm trying to do is get light against dark and dark against light. So you can show the edges of things by changes in value. You can also show the edges of things by line when you're stuck and you got to cheat.